Genesis chapter 2, sorry. So I can catch up here. There we go. Living Hope. We've been talking about the roles that are laid out for men and women in Genesis chapter 2, and from verse 18 down through verse 25. But the Lord said, right, that it was not good for Adam to be alone, so he creates a helpmeet for him, and that helpmeet obviously is Eve. And so we talked about the role that a man is supposed to fulfill as a husband and in the home. And so the role of a wife is to be a helper to the husband, right? To assist him, to support him in the role that God has given him to perform. And so with a wife's help, right, a husband can reach his full potential and can excel in what God has called him to do. And so give you some things that I think a wife should be, just like we did last week with what a husband should be. Number one, I think a wife ought to be a follower, right? 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 12 and 13. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. His justification for that he gives you in verse 13. For Adam was first formed, and then Eve. And so I think Scripture is very clear, really, about the fact, right, that a wife or a lady should follow the lead, right, of her husband, and her husband should be the one who is the teacher, right, in the home, the one who does that. And so give you a couple other verses in support of it, right? Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. Colossians 3:18, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as it is fit in the Lord. And so submission does not mean, right, servitude, which is oftentimes kind of the way that it is taken, right? And that is what it's taken to mean quite often, right? Is that submission is servitude, and that, right? She's supposed to bow the knee under the crack of his whip, right, and that kind of thing. And so, but the reality is that's not what submission is. Submission can only be done by the individual who is submitting, right? You can't be forced to submit. And so now you can be forced, right, to perform and act. You can be forced to do something, but you cannot be forced to submit. Submission is an internal act, and the external doesn't have an impact on that. And so you must choose submission. And so to submit really is to follow, right? Is to make the decision that the husband is going to take the lead, and that as a biblical wife, right, that you are going to follow his leadership. And so doesn't mean silence, right? Doesn't mean you can keep your mouth shut and just go with the program, right, or any of that kind of stuff. But it means ultimately that you're going to leave the final decision to your husband, right? Give you an example of that, right? Sarah, I think in Scripture is a good example of followership or submission. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 6, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as you do well and are not afraid with any amazement. All right? And so Sarah chose to follow Abraham, all right? To call him Lord, right, is the way that the Bible puts it there. Doesn't mean that I think as a husband you ought to go home this afternoon and tell your wife, right, from this point on I'm Lord, all right, and so you will refer to me as Lord, right? I don't think it's going to work out well to begin with, but